the show where three men make a baby, no women are even involved, they're that progressive. Wow. That is the wildly hyperbolic, completely provocative quote we are kicking things off with today. Just imagine it, right? You tune into a highly anticipated modern TV reboot, you're expecting some comforting nostalgia, and instead you're hit with a storyline so visually chaotic it leaves you totally bewildered. I mean, picture the sheer on-screen confusion of three separate male actors trying to navigate the literal logistics of creating a genetically engineered surrogate baby together. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, fiercely critical, and honestly deeply passionate breakdown of a modern television reboot. We're unpacking a massive critique that just absolutely tears into the fabric of modern Hollywood adaptations, and we are going to break the whole shebang down for you. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're deconstructing the modern adaptation critique. Now, let me be crystal clear right off the bat. We are not here to endorse or validate these views. Whether you lean left, right, or center, our goal today is strictly analytical. We're taking a heavily debated, highly critical review that sparked a massive amount of online chatter, and we're just organizing all that chaos into a structured analysis. We want to understand the exact anatomy of this specific type of media criticism. What exactly is this reviewer so fired up about, and how do they actually build their argument?
Okay, let's dive right in. To make sense of the reviewer's sprawling arguments, we've broken this critique down into 5 logical pillars. We're looking at the modern agenda critique, the emasculation of men, narcissistic female tropes, bizarre plot mechanics, and finally, the final verdict.
So starting with our very first pillar, the modern agenda critique, or politics over plot.
The foundational thesis of this entire critique is that the creators of this show prioritize progressive political messaging way over organic storytelling and character development. The reviewer essentially argues that the show feels a lot less like a narrative driven by passionate artists and more like a rigid corporate checklist handed down straight from a boardroom. Now, to really grasp this perspective, we have to define a few terms, but strictly through the lens of this critique. When the reviewer talks about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or SJW tropes, they aren't talking about grassroots activism. Not at all. They define these as perceived corporate mandates. The critique argues these concepts are practically forced onto the set, basically replacing genuine character growth with stiff, sanitized dialogue. The reviewer looks at a character protesting for inclusion not as a brave rebel, but as a mouthpiece for a corporate agenda, essentially tying the hands of the actors and writers.
And honestly, this is perfectly summed up by this quote right here. There's no activism without transgression. Can there be anything less transgressive than protesting for DEI, pushing against an open door? The reviewer just finds this utterly absurd. Picture the scene. A character deliberately framing an innocent person for a crime just to make some grand protest about the slow pace of diversity and inclusion. The reviewer points out that demanding what every major corporation in the world is already actively doing isn't rebellious. It's redundant. It's, as they say, pushing against an open door. Framing an innocent person to protest something the corporate world already agrees with, well, to the reviewer, that makes the character look completely ridiculous rather than heroic. Moving on to section 2, the emasculation of male characters. Is it humiliation by design? Here, the reviewer perceives a deliberate, systemic humiliation of the male characters throughout the entire series. We're not just talking about a few bad moments. The critique frames this as humiliation by design, like it's a structural choice by the writers to just tear down the men in the show. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what the reviewer means. Picture the sheer physical tragedy, and maybe comedy, of these moments. We've got a scene where a male actor is directed to apologize so desperately to a woman that he is visibly spitting as he begs to bask in her majesty. Then we have the visceral image of a father literally cowering while getting beaten up by his daughter wielding a slipper. We even have an actor forced to propose marriage by getting down not on one knee, but submissively on 2 knees. It's a visual the reviewer describes with reflexive disgust. And get this, even when a male character is just having a private hallucination, the director ensures he hallucinates scenarios where he is being actively humiliated. Now, amidst all this perceived humiliation, the reviewer actually does highlight one single positive message, and it revolves around this cake metaphor. Picture a bizarre, visually trippy, sci-fi drug-induced scene. A father suddenly realizes his purpose in life is, well, like a cake. He constantly gives slices of himself, his energy, his emotions, his sacrifices to his demanding family. But because he loves them and it's his purpose as a father, the cake endlessly regenerates. It's kind of sweet, right? The reviewer begrudgingly admits this is legitimately a good message about fatherhood and self-sacrifice, but they're heavily annoyed by the wildly weird, illegal medication binge framing that the show's artists use to actually deliver that emotional payoff. Let's hit section 3, narcissistic female tropes. Celebrated toxicity? So if the men are being humiliated left and right, how are the women being treated? Well, the reviewer argues that the show's female characters display deeply flawed, borderline toxic traits. But unlike the men, these traits are celebrated rather than condemned by the narrative. So the crucial point here is the sheer contrast in how the show handles its characters based on gender. On one hand, male characters are constantly apologizing, kneeling in submission, and forced to completely sacrifice their egos. On the flip side, the female characters are portrayed as dominant, unapologetic figures who act narcissistically but face absolutely zero narrative consequences. The reviewer finds this double standard incredibly frustrating. They point out that the show seems to bend over backward to justify the toxic behavior of its female cast, all while vilifying the men. To highlight just how extreme this actually gets, the reviewer points to this wildly chaotic quote. A female character casually admits to her partner that she has a criminal record for attempted murder. Her exact words? She didn't think you needed to know about her criminal record until we were serious because I was naked when I shot him in the balls. Wow. The critique points out the utter absurdity of this scene. Imagine the casual smirk of the actors delivering this line. This character is proudly confessing to what is essentially psychopathic behavior, withholding a massive, dangerous secret until she felt it was serious. Yet the show's framing presents her as this cool, empowered rebel. The reviewer notes that if the roles were reversed, or if a male character had done this, they would be treated like an absolute monster. And the reviewer lists several other grievances regarding the female characters to build this case. They complain about a character who supposedly solves complex global problems purely through nagging and painkillers, all while acting visibly superior to everyone else in the room. They highlight the sheer hypocrisy of a woman withholding a massive secret about attempted murder, yet violently condemning the men in her life for their own secrets. But the most egregious example? That would be a finale tribute event. Just imagine this scene. A grand, expensive, beautifully lit room meant to celebrate a father's life achievements. He's sitting there quietly while the daughter completely hijacks the microphone. She delivers an incredibly self-absorbed speech that shifts the entire focus of the father's tribute right onto her own childhood anxieties.
All right, moving into Section 4, Bizarre Plot Mechanics, when sci-fi meets absurdity.
When the show isn't busy pushing character agendas, the reviewer argues it descends into pure, unfiltered absurdity that completely shatters any grounded emotional stakes. First up, we have the visually baffling storyline where three men somehow use genetic engineering to create a surrogate baby together, which prompted that sarcastic opening quote about the show being so progressive. Then we have the father achieving his deep emotional breakthroughs, not through actual human connection, but by consuming a sci-fi drug described as a floating stick of water. I mean, what? And finally, there's a massive, highly produced emotional finale sequence that gets violently interrupted by characters literally choking on fake glitter falling from the ceiling. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the reviewer reacts to that whole glitter scene. They actually refer to the falling debris sarcastically as white falling turds. I mean, nobody expects that. They really don't. Picture the utter on-screen chaos. Characters wildly diving under tables to avoid inhaling the glitter, with a waitress actually having a severe medical reaction to it. The reviewer notes that within the universe of the show, this incredibly strange, chaotic physical disaster is bizarrely referred to as a teachable moment. For the critique, this is the absolute peak of the artists prioritizing weird, pretentious spectacle over logical storytelling. And that brings us to Section 5, the final verdict, the failure of modernization. After dissecting all the politics, the character assassinations, and the bizarre plots, what is the actual core of the reviewer's final thesis? Well, it's that there is a massive gap between what the creators tried to do and what the reviewer claims was actually accomplished. The creators tried to promote a progressive checklist. The reality, according to the reviewer, is that they just completely alienated the original target audience. They tried to uplift female characters. Instead, they created narcissistic and abusive tropes. They tried to modernize classic intellectual property. But the reality proved to the reviewer that you simply can no longer adapt old media successfully in today's Hollywood ecosystem. And the reviewer actually finds institutional proof for this massive failure in one simple number: 4. The studio dumped only 4 episodes of this show all at once. To the reviewer, this release strategy is a huge red flag. It signifies that the studio executives lacked faith in the project, realized what a total mess the artists had made, and just wanted to hide it as quickly and quietly as possible to avoid drawing any further attention. The reviewer leaves us with this rather melancholic takeaway. They say, I think it's another coin in the slot of you can't adapt any old stuff now. Maybe putting all the modern stuff into it ruined it. They express a genuine sadness here. They note that there are so many classic properties that would make incredible television today. But based on adaptations exactly like this one, they've completely lost faith that modern Hollywood frameworks can handle them without injecting clear biases and totally ruining the original magic that made these shows beloved in the very first place. Which leaves us with a massive industry-wide question to ponder. Does modernizing a classic IP with progressive themes inherently alienate its original audience, as this critique so forcefully argues? Or is this kind of adaptation merely an inevitable reflection of changing times and evolving societal norms? It's a debate that is currently defining the entire entertainment industry, and as we've seen today, the battle lines are drawn incredibly sharply. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the explainer. Let us know what you think, and as always, keep asking questions.